Well, you've just about made it. Welcome to the final lecture for this class. Today we'll discuss two topics, the Reformation and the Age of Discovery. The rough time period is between 1400 and 1600. There are a few themes to be addressed in this lecture. First of all, we'll explore the Protestant Reformation with the focus on three individuals: Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Henry VIII. Next, we'll look at European nations and how and why they established colonies and explored portions of the New World. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to compare and contrast the actions of different individuals and nations and try to determine which had the largest impact on the development of Western civilizations. First, we'll explore the Protestant Reformation by looking at the actions of Martin Luther and John Calvin. The Protestant Reformation is one of the key events in the 1500s. It had a major impact on all aspects of society, and it resulted in the development of different Christian denominations throughout the Western tradition. The individual who is often seen as the founder of this Protestant Reformation is Martin Luther, and he's shown here. He was born in Germany, came from kind of a middle-class family, but eventually joined the priesthood following a life-changing event. He eventually became a church scholar, and he began teaching at a university. He took his faith very seriously and began to see what he believed were problems within the Catholic Church. Then in 1517, he posted the so-called 95 Theses. The 95 Theses outlined what Luther believed to be the major problems with the Catholic Church. There are three main areas that he saw. First of all, he argued the system of selling indulgences was corrupt. This was money paid to the Catholic Church in order to counteract sins people had committed during their lifetime. Do you remember this slide from an earlier presentation? Indulgences were first outlined by Pope Urban II during the First Crusade. This was money that people paid to the church in order to help with the war effort. If people gave money, their sins were forgiven. This system continued even in the years after the Crusades. While the Crusades were not going on in Martin Luther's lifetime, one of the things that was undertaken was an attempt to try to rebuild the cathedral in the city of Rome. Numerous people paid money to the church in order to help fund the construction of St. Peter's Cathedral, and it's shown here. Luther also attacked two other areas of church doctrine. He argued that salvation could be achieved only through one's faith, as opposed to good works. He also attacked the authority of priests and the Pope. He argued that the only source of God's Word was the Bible. The printing press, described in an earlier presentation, helped to spread the ideas like wildfire throughout Germany and the rest of Europe. Prior to the Protestant Reformation, Western European churches recognized the authority of the Pope in Rome. However, as this map shows, as the years went on, different Christian denominations began to emerge in different countries. Another individual who influenced the Protestant Reformation was John Calvin. Calvin was born in France, and he too was critical of popes and the Catholic Church. One doctrine associated with his teachings was predestination. He believed that God had already predetermined who would or would not be saved. Therefore, he was critical of the Catholic Church's emphasis on good works. However, he still argued that people should live lives based on morality. Next, we'll look at Henry VIII and the impact of the Reformation in England. Whereas theologians were the driving force for the Reformation in Germany and other parts of Europe, a politician was most influential in England. Henry VIII was married. His wife's name was Catherine of Aragon. However, the spark that started the Reformation in England was that he wanted a divorce from his wife. Henry's wife, Catherine, is shown here. The two had one child, a daughter named Mary. However, Henry became obsessed because he wanted a son. Henry, along with the consent of Parliament, broke with the Catholic Church and established a new church. This was the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church had very similar doctrines as compared to the Catholic Church. However, there was one major difference. The Anglican Church allowed for divorce. On the right, we see a portrait of Anne Boleyn. This was Henry's second wife. They had a child together. Her name was Elizabeth. All told, Henry married 6 times. On the left, we see a portrait of Queen Mary I. This was Henry VIII's daughter, along with Catherine. She became queen in 1553. She was very Catholic and took several steps to return England to the Catholic Church. She earned the nickname or the moniker Bloody Mary because she persecuted Protestants and even had many executed. When Mary died in 1558, her half-sister Elizabeth took over as queen. She was the daughter of Henry and Anne Boleyn. She tried to unify all of England, and her religious policy was based on moderation and compromise. However, she also sought to reinstitute the Protestant faith. Once again, we see the Crown working with Parliament. In 1559, England's Parliament not only recognized Elizabeth as the Queen, she also was named the supreme head of the Church. In that same year, a new Book of Common Prayer was adopted. While this included many Protestant doctrines, it still retained many Catholic rituals. Elizabeth ruled England for nearly 50 years. She never married, prompting some to refer to her as the Virgin Queen. Many historians argue that she ruled over England's Golden Age. Possibly a high point of Elizabeth's reign came in 1588. Conflict had been mounting with Spain for decades. In that year, Spain attempted to invade England. A vast armada of 130 ships, including 25,000 sailors, set sail to invade England. The Spanish were defeated. This ushered in England's Golden Age. Next, we'll look at the age of exploration and discovery and why Europeans undertook their trips of discovery. There were many reasons why Europeans undertook their exploratory missions. The goal of the next few slides is to outline some of the general motivations for colonization and exploration. One general motivation would be based on economics. Some were looking for shorter trade routes to the east, as Europeans wanted easier access to goods from Africa and Asia, such as cinnamon, nutmeg, and sugar. They needed these to add spice to their bland diet. In addition to these items, many others sought gold and other precious metals. While economics played an important role for many, others came due to religious reasons. Some wanted to practice their religion freely, as they hoped to escape persecution. Yet still others wanted to spread Christianity to new areas. Here we see a missionary who worked in New Mexico. This is Mother Maria de Jesus. But there were many other factors as well. Some came seeking adventure and traveled because they wanted to see new lands. However, there's one factor numerous people often overlook. A significant portion of people who became colonists in the Western Hemisphere came because they were forced. These were slaves. Africans didn't travel seeking gold. They didn't migrate as missionaries to spread Christianity or Islam or another religious belief. They came because they were forced. The actions of the first country we will look at would be Spain. This is the same map which was shown earlier, demonstrating some of the common trade routes from Europe to Asia. Because there was so much wealth to be had in the trade of spices, silk, and other precious metals, some in Europe hoped to discover shorter routes to the east. One such explorer was Christopher Columbus. In 1492, he sailed the ocean blue and ended up in the Bahamas. This was in October of 1492. Christopher Columbus was the son of a rope maker, or a weaver, from Genoa, Italy. As a young man, he demonstrated skill in mathematics as well as navigation. In 1492, he was hired by the Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella to undertake his voyage of discovery. This map identifies several of the voyages of discovery made by different Europeans. Notice the routes identified in red. They signify the 4 separate trips made by Columbus to what he thought were the Indies. I think many of us are familiar with the names of the 3 ships included in Columbus's voyage: the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Many years ago, the Nina visited Ludington. This, of course, was a recreation of the original ship. My daughters really enjoyed it. Columbus was wrong when he believed that he had found a quicker route to Asia, and he wasn't the first European to successfully cross the Atlantic. However, his actions were important. His voyages were sponsored by the Spanish crown, and they caught the attention of other rulers. His actions were then followed up with large-scale efforts to explore the region and establish a permanent presence. Now we'll continue the study of Spanish exploration by addressing the conquest of Mexico and their move northward to what is now known as New Mexico. Cortez was another important Spanish explorer. In 1519, he landed in what is now Veracruz, Mexico, with about 600 soldiers. His ultimate goal was to bring back wealth and riches to Spain. The arrow on this map shows the approximate spot where Cortez and his men landed. Once they landed, they actually destroyed their ship, as Cortez was intent on finding wealth in Mexico. He figured if they did find wealth, they would be able to rebuild their ship with no problems. If they didn't, they would die trying, as they were not going to return to Spain as failures. Cortez and his men did find wealth among the Aztecs, particularly in their capital city of Tenochtitlan. In a relatively short period of time, Cortez and his men were able to conquer the Aztecs. There were a variety of factors which facilitated the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs. First, Cortez and his men were allowed to enter the capital as they believed Cortez was the god Quetzalcoatl, whose return was predicted in Aztec legend. However, rather than acting like gods, the Spanish seemed to worship the gold and other precious metals as gods themselves. So, after a short time, the Spanish were driven out of the city. But then disaster struck. The disaster came in the form of disease. In this case, it was smallpox. This was probably the biggest factor which seriously weakened the Aztecs and led to their defeat. Other factors led to the Aztecs' defeat. First, the Spanish viewed warfare differently. For example, the Aztecs viewed warfare as highly spiritual and ceremonial. This can be seen with the different depictions of the clothing worn by both sides in the image on the right. The Aztecs are shown wearing colorful costumes, while the Spanish wear European battle dress. Finally, Spanish technology in the form of horses and gunpowder also were factors. Eventually, the Spanish would erect the new capital of Mexico City to replace Tenochtitlan. The Spanish continued to expand their empire eastward, establishing outposts in different parts of North America. When St. Augustine was established in 1565, it became the first permanent European settlement in what would become the United States. However, the Spanish also expanded northward from Mexico into what is now New Mexico in 1598. We will now look at several examples of French exploration and discovery in the Western Hemisphere. One of the important early French explorers was Jacques Cartier. In the 1530s, he undertook several exploratory trips along the east coast of what is now Canada. He followed much of the St. Lawrence River as well. The arrow here is pointing to one of Cartier's voyages. This one is from 1534. Here we see some of Cartier's excursions along the St. Lawrence River. He made it all the way to the present-day city of Montreal. Are you from Ludington or Manistee? Well, the lumber barons Antoine and Warren Cartier were direct descendants of Jacques Cartier. The two homes which are shown here are located in Ludington. However, Antoine Cartier spent a lot of time in Manistee before he moved to Ludington, and I believe Warren was born in Manistee. While Cartier never permanently settled in what was called New France, his actions were important. They lay the foundation for French claims to North America. Cartier was followed by another important Frenchman, Samuel de Champlain. Champlain founded the city of Quebec in 1608, which eventually became a key trading post as the French specialized in fur trade. As you see with this map, the arrow is pointing to the city of Quebec, which was founded in 1608. A lot of early French exploration was conducted by missionaries or people involved in the fur trade. Champlain tried to change that. He advocated that the French should try to establish permanent communities and have families migrate. Eventually, he earned the nickname the Father of New France. Eventually, French claims in North America would include the entire purple area shown here on this map. We will now investigate the actions of the English in regards to their exploration and discovery of the Western Hemisphere. An early English explorer was John Cabot. The arrows here point to Cabot's voyages in the late 1400s. While Cabot's explorations were a start, the English didn't try to establish a permanent settlement for some time. This first attempt took place in the 1580s, at Roanoke. Sir Walter Raleigh was the most important person associated with the establishment of Roanoke Colony. He came from a distinguished family, but he was also helped by his personal relationship with England's Queen, Elizabeth. The proposed colony of Roanoke was located off the coast of what is now North Carolina. The circled area on this map indicates the location of Roanoke Colony. It was first settled in 1585. Overall, the colony had a very unique purpose. Its specific goal was to serve as a base for pirate ships. Families didn't settle at Roanoke. Instead, there were 300 soldiers. Roanoke was located just north of the Spanish in Florida to enable these pirates to attack Spanish ships. Relations with local Indians were quite poor. Conflict developed in a short period of time. The name of the Indians who lived here were the Croatoans. While it's unclear exactly what happened, when a supply ship finally was able to return to Roanoke in 1590, the settlement was abandoned. This first attempt to establish a colony in North America was a dismal failure for the English. In later years, particularly 1607, the English did establish another colony in the region. However, that will be covered in another class. Here we see two different portrayals of the mythical figure of Pocahontas. We're just about done, but I'd like to review some of the high points of this presentation. Today, this lecture covered two main topics: the Protestant Reformation and exploration and discovery. What you want to be able to do is you would want to be able to identify key events and individuals from these eras. Who do you believe had the biggest impact on the development of Western civilizations? Well, this is the last lecture. I had a great semester with you. I hope you learned a lot. Take care, good luck on the final, and I hope to see you soon.